The October issue of Exceptional Parent magazine focuses on the transitioning from work to school for teenagers and young adults with ADHD. The transition from school to work can be especially challenging for teenagers and young adults with ADHD, as their symptoms can make it difficult to thrive in fast-paced and structured work environments. To read more, sign up for free today at www.epmagazine.com.
Hi, baby. I'm back. You see, I am the replacer. I replace you so you can play Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Really good.
Where's Dad?
I'm your daddy now.
Oh, hello, Daddy.
I like that.
Mittens is stuck again.
Mittens, you did this to yourself.
Sir, can you please just unlock the doors?
Just give me 5 stars. Now get the hell out of my car. Tacos, anyone? No! Blessings and guilt for all.
Your Holiness!
Kiss your own baby, lady. Baby, bless. Call of Duty Black Ops is back.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, 2 Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. 2 Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, 2 lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention.
Suicide is complex. There is no single cause.
And it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military.
Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not.
If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available.
There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis.
Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay.
Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubuzoo Network. You can find out more on hubuzoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asek of Asek Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing in Para, Washington, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company and Exceptional Parent Magazine. Thank you. So we're out of the studio. We're on the road, just like the Marine Corps, any climb in place. And the place is South Paris, Maine. Maine has a lot. There's like a Norway, Maine. I got to ask about that. But anyway, we are in Maine. I'm remote on assignment. And this is a special show. I've been waiting to do this one because for like the second real time, I'm talking to an actual hawker. The first one was Ulrich Kromer from Germany. He was a hawker. And now, to my left, your right, Major Theresa Drag from 1st LAAM Battalion, Alpha Battery, fellow hawker, sci-fi extraordinaire genius. Welcome to Oscar Mike Radio. Oh, and we got a special topic for you, but we're going to get to that later. Ma'am, welcome to Oscar
Awesome
Mike.
to see you again, as always.
This is like, you're real.
You're real.
You're real.
Yeah. My memories were not in my imagination.
No.
Yeah.
So we're here now, and we connected, and it's like, oh yeah, there was a captain or lieutenant Drag out in 1st LAAM in Yuma, Arizona, and I don't know how. I don't know what your fellow officers said, but we always got a kick out of it in Charlie Battery. Like, her name is Drag. That must be a real.
Oh yeah, trust me. The day I got commissioned, one of my friends came up to me and said, "I can hardly wait until you make Major." Oh yeah.
And you did.
And I did. So it was pretty cool.
So we're getting a lot of good stuff because we're in the VFW in South Paris, Maine, and I gotta tell you, it was just picturesque driving through here. Like, my soul got refreshed. We'll get into that in a minute. So we're in the VFW. You have a lot of stuff that you do, for veterans advocacy, and that's all good stuff. But tell us first how you go from, doing your thing to get in the Marine Corps. And, I talk about Hawk, but I want to hear you talk about Hawk.
Well, I was really lucky to get into Hawk because at that time, the Marine Corps was even more restrictive as to what women could do in the Marine Corps. And so I was lucky enough, I was enlisted as a field radio operator. So I had a little bit of a good idea as to, how things worked at that level. Made the exalted rank of Lance Corporal. And then I went to the dark side and went to OCS and TBS and got to pick our MOSs. And something about the missiles really appealed to me.
Yeah.
And so I put in for Hawk as one of my choices, and then I had to put in for Hawk again as one of my choices, and managed to listen to the guidance and got it. And yeah, going from, green Maine, green Virginia, green Carolinas to Yuma was definitely a change. Just very different natural environment. But it was still the Marine Corps, so that was cool.
But people talk about 29 Palms being the absolute hottest and worst. I'm like, no, there's this little base called Yuma.
There's this little base called Yuma that you literally have flights canceled because it gets too hot for them to take off. Which actually almost happened to me once on a TAD trip. I was TAD back to Yuma and wanted to get out for a long weekend. The only reason I got out was because I was broken at the time. There was only 3 of us on the plane when it took off. It was crazy. But yeah, so you get out there and working with the missiles and the radar and working with other Marines. It was a good time. So, definitely a good thing to remember.
Tell us, because I've said, like, I'll be in a Marines or being Marines, and I did this and I did that. Like, what did you do? And I tell them, and it's like, wow, really? But tell me what it's like when you first watch your first missile go off the rail. What was that like, Teresa?
Are we G-rated or X-rated?
Well, I can bleep it out.
It was one of the most exciting things that have ever happened. And that's including the fact that I got to pull the lanyard on an artillery tube as well. And I got to drop a round down a mortar tube as well. And I got to ride in the back seat of an F-18 as well. And pushing that fire button in the fire control in the back of and we were up in the back of the 5-ton, and having that thing go off and then hit the drone and explode tops all of it. It was amazing.
There's nothing like it. Like, you hear the boom.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just hearing the boom. It like goes through you.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're told, and then you have to, wait a minute, that's it breaking the sound barrier before it gets off the end of the rail. And then we're not shooting at something, 500 yards or a couple miles away like the artillery people do. This is like 20 to 40 miles away. We got to be on it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it was amazing. It was so much fun.
So, we've gone through this. We kind of talked about this in Seattle, but people don't understand what it was like when we're doing our job. And for me, ma'am, I was in. When I saw the missile go off, I said, I will do 20 years in Hawk, no problem. But then I had to remember, oh yeah, I got to Fort Bliss and they told us it's going away.
Yeah.
It was really difficult for me and a lot of us enlisted to deal with. What was it like for the officers realizing that your billet is gone? You got to find some other way to stay in.
It was interesting because, like you said, we had to find some other way to stay in. And they did give us some input into where we might be going. And you kind of had to like call all your buddies and be like, okay, what is it really like what you're doing? I get an opportunity to check. And I knew from my time in Hawk that I really wanted something that would stay in the field and be working with Marines as much as possible. So that kind of gave me that direction. But at the same time, just dealing with very practical stuff of making sure all the Marines are taken care of. Making sure that they understand all the deadlines and the paperwork and, if they want to stay in or not and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that took our focus. And so there wasn't a whole lot of time left to worry, Okay. You're just doing stuff. Yeah.
But, you're there and I'm there. Remember, there's all the launchers in a line, all the dead birds in a line, all the loaders in a line, and you realize it's going away and then it's gone. I got out, for a lot of reasons, but also I'm like, wait a minute, because they finally admitted, like, yeah, we knew that this was going to happen before you even, got to boot camp. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what? I remember the career jammer was like, don't you want to? No, I don't want to stay in. I mean, why am I even here? And it was too bad because I told him I wanted to stay in, but you had to, you stayed in longer, like a couple other people did. Mm-hmm. How did you navigate getting to your next duty station and billet?
It was interesting. And again, it was just trying to figure out what choices would get me something that would work out in the field. I ended up going to...
You didn't like S1, S2 in the head shed, no?
I had already done college before I came into the Marine Corps. I had had an office job. I knew that if I stayed in as an officer, I would end up in an office job. You can't escape it totally. So I wanted to stay away from the office as long as I possibly could. So I went to Direct Air Support Control.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Now, what is that?
Direct Air Support Control, DASC, is basically the talking to the friendly aircraft, right? So Hawk, we were talking to the friendly ground guys and trying to shoot down the bad aircraft, right? The DASC is talking to the friendly aircraft, one, so that the Hawkers don't mistake it for enemy, right? Because that's really important. And just, getting the helicopters where they're supposed to go, keeping them away from the artillery and the tanks, and just, it's air traffic control, but no radar. It was just, a lot of communication and coordination. So
So
moving pieces and pictures in your head.
speaking of not shooting down what you're not supposed to shoot down,
Yeah.
you remember the Patriot battery that shot down a friendly?
Yeah.
Can you go into that? Because a lot of Army guys poke fun of us hawkers, but I'm like, well, we never did friendly fire like you all did. Do you remember what happened around that time? Because it was a pretty big deal.
It was a pretty big deal, and part of the challenge is always the communication, the identification, right? I also was lucky enough to be Stinger qualified as an officer, and they even more so than in Hawk, because in Hawk, in addition to the radar, we had the long range camera, and we had, better tech to help us confirm what we were looking at. Whereas the Stinger guys, they're a little Mark 1 eyeball, and so, they had to be much better at aircraft identification and the procedures, and that's where the DAS came in also, was setting up those procedures, knowing what the airspace is like, that sort of thing. But yeah, so if you have a breakdown with that, if you have a breakdown of, especially when you're really reliant on the tech, if you have a breakdown of the tech, it creates friendly fire, basically.
Yeah.
So, whether it's missiles or air on air or ground on ground, that's the big thing, is if the tech breaks down and the comm breaks down. Friendly
fire isn't.
Yeah.
You do all this. Did you stay in this field for the rest of your Marine Corps career, or did you do something else?
I essentially stayed in aviation command and control field for my time in. But that had a lot of different shades to it.
Yeah.
So some of it was paperwork, dealing with Pentagon, dealing with describing the equipment that we needed, describing how we wanted the units to work, testing if they were looking at new equipment, whether it was brand new or whether it was something we were getting from the Army or the Air Force. A lot of joint work with the Army and the Air Force, and the Navy also. When we went into Afghanistan,
okay.
Before OEF was OEF, there was a small Marine unit off of the MU that went in. So that was great fun too.
I'm sure.
And again, talking to the aircraft and helping them to understand the dangers of missiles and that sort of thing. So yeah, having that knowledge of missiles from Hawk really helped with that also. And even just getting deployed with Army. I mean, I was with the Army headquarters unit, and the basic, 5-paragraph order and knowing how to brief what's going on. So everything we learned from way back in boot camp just kept applying all the way through.
So last Hawk thing before we move on to your transition is, it's funny when I tell people Hawk is still being used. And
yeah.
What do you think when you see Hawk being, you can get pictures of people using Hawk units in Ukraine right now. And I try to tell people, look, they don't really advertise it, but those batteries stop the Russian air drive. What do you feel about that when you see that old unit still being used effectively?
I think it's really cool, actually, because it shows me that what we were training for would have actually worked.
Yeah.
That it was worthwhile to keep training on it. I think that as a whole, as the joint forces, we've been really spoiled, because our Air Force is so good that we haven't had to worry as much. That's why they were able to get rid of Hawk. we didn't have to worry as much because of our Air Force. Quick story, on the Mew, right after the horrible events of 9/11, we were leaving Australia going to East Timor, and they almost canceled the humanitarian mission because they were concerned about attacks. And one of the reasons why they allowed us to keep going was because we had the Stinger missiles there as part of my detachment. And so we provided the air cover because we didn't have our Air Force covering the Mew. So between the ship's missiles and the Stinger missiles, luckily we didn't have to shoot anybody down, but we were there and ready. So that was...
No, it's just a really interesting aspect because my son's like, Dad, what's that? I said, that's the system that I worked on, and it's still being used. And, some people poo-poo air defense, but I'm like, well, without those batteries there, the Russian Air Force would have rolled right over.
There's buried them.
Yeah, just kind of cool to see. So you do this, you get to the end of your Marine Corps time, and we've talked about that, and you get out. Now, I've asked other officers, ma'am, us enlisted, not really knowing how you all work sometimes, we think that when you all separate, you go through your class and then a stretch limousine picks you up. You go home, there's a red carpet, rolled out for you.
No.
And just, opportunities are just handed to you.
No.
And I'm trying to see if that's true for you too.
No.
No?
No. For a few different reasons. Well, I mean, there are a lot of efforts ongoing, and they've improved since I got out to give those classes, to make the connections between the people separating or retiring and jobs like on the outside and stuff. In my case, I think because I had so much of that time in the office and in the Pentagon, I was like, working with contractors, I was like, I don't want to do contractor stuff. Can't do that, right? And a lot of pull to come to South Paris. I basically grew up here. But yeah, there's not a lot. You gotta figure it out. Which means now that we have things like Facebook, which didn't really have as much back then. I'm on Facebook a lot with current Marines, transitioning Marines, other branches as well, but primarily Marines. Just, kind of letting them know what it's like on the outside and stuff, and helping point them towards what is out there. So.
Well, Facebook's how we got connected again, and that was very, very cool. I'm like, I remember her, because to your point, there were not, we called them WMs at the time. That was the official designation. Now, if I may, because I said that to a newer Marine, she's like, I'm a Marine, don't call me a WM ever. I'm like, in my Green Monster, I got in boot camp in 95. That was the official designation for female Marines.
Yeah.
WMs.
Well, with a lot of other categorizations, people try to come up with terms that are descriptive and not insulting. And when they came up with WM, that was what the intention was to have, an official neutral term when you did have to make the distinction. We have to make that distinction less, but there are times when we still need to.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have acronyms for everything, right? Because you just can't take the time. Even when you talk really, really fast, like you're talking on the radio, it still takes time to say all those words. And so you come up with acronyms. So yeah, it's right there. We move away from it now. But
So you get out, you come back to South Paris, Maine. I tell you what, folks, coming up here was a real treat. Maine's like this quiet little jewel in New England that some people know about, but a lot of people in the United States don't. And it's just like rolling hills and like I was telling you and Rick before we got started, just the air tasted and smelled better. I don't know how to describe it. And then I come in your VFW and I'm like, this is what, to me, the quintessential New England VFW looks like.
Yeah.
It's just laid out really well. You have the wall of honorees and past commanders, and we're in post 9787.
Yep.
And you're heavily involved with the VFW, which is kind of rare. And what I mean by rare is, you see the headlines where, VFWs, American Legions, AMVETs, DAVs are having trouble keeping things going. But this is an active VFW here. So before we get into, let's cover that. How do you all keep this going? Because it's really vibrant.
Well, I think the key part is the community, right?
Okay.
Not only the support from the community, but the fact that being part of the VFW kind of reconnects us with the community.
Yep.
You had mentioned before how we reconnected on Facebook.
Yep.
And so some people still don't do Facebook, but being part of the VFW is a way to connect with people that you used to work with, and connect with veterans that, are the brothers you haven't met yet, type of thing. You can't see it from here, but the wall behind has pictures of the post commanders. And what's really cool to me, since mine is the most recent one up there, if I look back, I can see guys that I knew when I was small.
Wow. That's a good picture.
So
of you, ma'am.
it's a really cool thing to be able to look up there and then talk with some of the older gentlemen that knew these same guys in different ways. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
So those memories and legacies stay alive because of the relationship between the commanders and, you going back that far and them going back even further. Very, very cool.
Yep. And it's nice because we have a Legion here in town. And so the Legion and the VFW do a lot of events together, resource fairs and participating in the Chamber of Commerce Christmas parade. And, we do like public suppers that are a really good way of community having a place to come in and get a cheap meal.
That's the thing. I'm like, a lot of times, he's a member of the VFW. I'm not going to go to his thing, and, vice versa for the American Legion. But I'm like, we all got to come together.
Oh yeah. And I mean, you can't totally get away from friction. When we were in, it was the same thing. Some units worked better together than others, and sometimes there was more friction and you had to figure out why. Maybe somebody needed to go to a different unit. But the majority of the time, you keep focused on the mission and things get done. And I think that happens. And also, people move on, they get rotated out, maybe they get a better job. And so you have to be ready for things to change. And then just, keep your eye on the mission is kind of a key part of it.
So we connected on Facebook.
Yep.
There's the First LAAM Battalion Facebook group, and that's a very cool little sorority and fraternity. And then we started talking offline because you saw that I crocheted. And you're like, hey, I do this quilts thing, Quilts of Valor. Come check it out. So I'm like, I don't know anything about quilts. I'm doing good just to crochet, but I'm like, this is really cool. But how you all, use quilts here at the VFW to come together. So I guess start with telling me how you got into this org and what is Quilts of Valor, please.
So Quilts of Valor itself is now a nationwide nonprofit.
Okay.
Let me read this right so I get it right. The mission is to cover service members and veterans touched by war with comforting and healing quilts of valor. When it started, the lady that started it, her son was in the Army and deployed, right? So she was really worried about him and came up with this idea that if the soldier gets wrapped with a quilt, that provides comfort and strength and protection against the demons that can come. And she hooked up with a chaplain at Walter Reed down in DC, and it kind of went from there, and it's expanded to cover all U.S. service members and honorably discharged veterans, and there are groups in all 50 states. Additionally, they've inspired groups in Canada.
Oh, really?
And in Australia. And Maine, because of the geography, has a really good working relationship with some of the Canadian-based groups. And there are actually U.S. veterans that live in Canada and will coordinate to wrap them. We call it wrapping them with a quilt. I got kind of started late with it. I mean, I'd heard about it when it first started. I was in the DC area. Didn't really think of anything further about it. Knew as I was getting to the end of my time in the Marine Corps that one of the skills that I hadn't mastered yet was sewing. I knew that was something that I thought I should know how to do. So I finally got my sewing machine, PX Special. Finally figured it out. YouTube is super helpful on that. And sewed a few things, did a historical dress, decided that quilts were much easier, and quickly ran out of people to give a quilt to, right? And then I saw at one of my VFW conventions another veteran who was presented with a Quilt of Valor. And I went, I need to find out more about that.
Yeah.
So we had the state coordinator come to this post and kind of give a presentation to the post members and the auxiliary, and we awarded a quilt to one of our senior members, and everybody kind of went, yeah, we want to support that, we want to get behind that. So the post actually supports one of the local groups, and literally lets them store fabric and batting upstairs. And we have sew days, which we call, where people get together and just we'll have 10 or 12 different sewing machines in here all going and swapping fabric and stuff. And so it can be really exciting. And then we'll also, we had our post meeting just a couple of days ago, and we were able to wrap 3 of the members with quilts.
That's fantastic.
So it's really cool.
Because I have a poncho liner. I don't call them a whoopee. That's how old I am. But there's something about a blanket.
There's something about that quilt or whoopee that can be very comforting.
Right?
Yeah. And with the quilts, can I?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So this one is not done, okay? But the quilt top is basically done. So it's 3 layers. We have a quilt top that is pieced of different fabrics, and in this case we have one that's been pieced in this pattern around the edge. And we tend to do the red, white, and blue, very patriotic, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah,
but we do like them. And then the quilt actually comes in layers, right? So this one isn't put together yet. It has a back, which is 1 solid piece usually, or 2 sewn together at the most. And that kind of gives the strength for the whole quilt. And then you have the batting in the middle, which is this kind of felted cotton. It's really soft. And that's what kind of gives it the cushiness and the warmth.
Like a sandwich or an Oreo cookie.
Exactly a sandwich. We call it sandwiching the quilt.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And then this piece on top. And so we'll smooth them all out, put them all together, and then sew them so they stay together. And then put the binding on and the label and everything.
This is amazing. All handmade?
Yeah. Well, yes and no, right? Handmade with the use of our technology, right? We like our sewing machines.
Yeah, but not like a factory.
No, not like a factory. People will sit there and cut it out by hand to get the pieces and then sew them together. And then stitch it all together So, and what's really cool is like I awarded one to this gentleman at the Veterans Home a few months ago, and his health wasn't that great, his eyesight wasn't that great, but when he felt the quilt and he touched it, he went, "Oh, this is one of those where you put together the different pieces, right?"
Right.
And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, I love it." And so it just made him so happy. And, you know, that's really what it's all about. Is
This is something else. Now, I just learned a whole lot. I thought that, you know, when you see quilts with like the squares in them,
mm-hmm.
I thought that you all had to like stitch together individually each square as is. I didn't realize it was layered.
Well, you do, right? So you stitch together the squares or the triangles or whatever for the top. And then you put the middle and the back together.
I thought I thought it was like one top, middle, bottom.
There is actually a technique that does it that way.
Oh, yeah?
But I find it to be much harder.
Oh, yeah.
I like doing it the whole top and then putting all the sandwich together.
Very nice.
So, yeah.
Very nice.
This is pretty cool.
Yes, it
So
is.
eventually this one will be all put together and awarded to another veteran. So.
Now, what's it like? We'll get to the, giving, the wrapping of the veteran, but you have the VFW here.
Yep.
South Paris, Maine, Post 9787, right? You have all these tables. You have this space. And a lot of times I hear, like, I got the VFW, I got the American Legion halls, and I'm trying to figure out how to get people together. But you all are doing it by bringing people together from the community. They don't have to be veterans, and they make these blankets. You watch this as a commander. What's going through your mind when you see the community literally coming together?
Makes me happy.
Yeah.
Makes me glad that I came home. And it really energizes you to do more. I think, one thing is when you, especially just getting out of the military and you're not quite sure what to do, it's easy to kind of stay in your own little bubble.
Yep.
Or to just like dive into the 9-to-5 job and just, work away at that. But to be able to come to the post and work on different projects, with other veterans, with the auxiliary, with other community members, it's a good way of connecting and kind of
what other projects do you all do here?
We support the Girl Scouts. We don't have a scouting group that meets all the time here, but we will work on projects with the local Boy Scout groups, and we'll have the Girl Scout leadership meet here. Along with the Legion, we'll do things as far as like ceremonies for different holidays, right? Like so Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Flag Day. One thing which is kind of a small service, but is a good one to have for the community, is give people a place to dispose of flags, right? So if you have your U.S. flag and it's gotten beat up in the windstorms that we have, which can get a bit fierce, or just, baked by the sun, and you want to retire it respectfully, we have a place outside where people can bring and drop off their flags, and then we will periodically have a flag retirement ceremony. So they're taken care of. They're not put in the trash, right?
Just out of curiosity, because I'm talking to a couple of VFW commanders and Legion commanders, is one thing they are trying to do is, if they know a kid is graduating high school and going to the military, like he's in the delayed entry program or is starting to talk to a recruiter and sign his intent or her intent, they try to connect with that high school student. So when he or she gets out, there's a way for them to come home and not have to worry about a job necessarily. You got to worry, you got to hustle, but they want that connection start before they get in the military. So I guess my question is, Maine has a spread out population. It's not as populated as, say, other states.
And not like Boston.
No. That's one of the things I love about it is, so I guess my question is how do you all stay connected to your active duty military and veterans in a situation like this?
Well, tech helps a lot, right, with the Facebook. And other than that, it's just getting out there. The last 2 people that we had that joined the Post literally found us because we were having an event here at the Post, and they had just moved in down the street, and they saw all the cars, so they came in to see what was going on, right? So by keeping the connections that you have active and on, it kind of gives you the ability to make new connections. I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing of when you come home, when you transition out of the military, you don't want to just kind of like be in your own bubble just by yourself. You need to keep a few connections. And then as you work past that and kind of are ready to make more, those existing connections let you make more.
Gotcha.
Everything from, just Memorial Day, we have what we call Buddy Poppy Drive. And the Legion and the VFW, we work together so that we don't have it on the exact same day. Right? And so, but we're out in the community talking to people and meeting with people and explaining to them about the Buddy Poppies and inviting them to the suppers. So you have to kind of force yourself to be a little outgoing. But it works. It's worth it.
So, not to put you on the spot, but I would be curious to know, like in Massachusetts, you talk to enough veteran service officers, enough post commanders, and other people at the Commonwealth state level and locally. They're starting to see this trend in that state where veterans, kids join the military, and whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or 20, they join the military and are coming back to Massachusetts less and less. And they know it's because, housing is a problem. And they're trying to figure out how to get around that. In Maine or in your area, what are some of the challenges you think veterans face in this area? And what are you all trying to do to get around those?
Definitely housing, right?
Really?
Oh, yeah. Maine definitely has a housing crunch. And it's a combination of there's not a lot, and what there is can be really expensive. And there's a lot of different people working on that. Everything from setting up little housing communities to just vouchers. We get calls here at the Post that somebody has an issue with their housing, and as a Post by ourselves, there's not a whole lot that we can necessarily do. But because we've kept connections with a lot of different agencies and a lot of different posts, that's how we're able to help. And it can be things as simple as, somebody lost their house, whether it's because they lost their job or the house burned down. There's so many different reasons why somebody may lose their housing situation. And then we get them in touch with the people who specialize in that. But then it could be like the little things like, okay, great, they've got me a new apartment, but how do I get my stuff there, right? So we coordinate with our members and other groups, and okay, all the guys with pickups, right? Thursday, we're going to meet up here, and we're going to pack this person up and move them down here and put them together. And you just, again, it comes back to the connections of we call each other and we help each other out, and you just keep rolling with that same thing, you know?
So you keep saying connections, and one thing that I found personally in looking at veterans advocacy, it really is the power of the relationship or the connection to have, good outcomes. And it seems like a lot of us just want to stay, like you said, in our little hole and, watch TV or Netflix or play the Xbox.
And that's okay for short periods of time.
Okay.
And that's where these quilts come in really handy, right? So when you need that alone time, you can take your quilt and curl up, maybe with a cat or a dog or a duck, and watch your Netflix, right? And take that time, because you can't be outgoing 100% of the time, right? You take that time to recharge and relax, and then you turn around and you reconnect.
Awesome. You're the post commander now.
Yep.
You also do several other things. Let's talk about the sci-fi for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we got to.
Oh,
That's how we first, met in person. That was really wild. Where did your love of sci-fi come from?
From day one.
Really?
Oh, yeah. From day one, books, TV. Well, I'm actually old enough that I watched the first moon landing. I wasn't very old, right? I was a little teeny kid, but I was just conscious enough of the world around me to be like, that thing is that thing up in the sky, right? And reading and stuff. So from day one. And it just kind of, it ebbs and flows, right? Just because you're interested in something doesn't mean you have to do it 24/7 forever. You can do it for a little bit and then take a break and do something else and then come back to it, right? So I came back to sci-fi. And just, again, connections. A gentleman that I knew through Renaissance festivals, right? Because he was a jouster and I was a squire. I know, it was awesome. Was writing a book, which happened to be a sci-fi type book with a Marine character, and wanted input, right? So I gave him input, maybe more than he wanted, but I gave him the input. And then he's like, hey, there's this con that I'm going to, and I think you'd be a good panelist. And I went, okay. I've never done it before, right? Never saw myself as a panelist, never had been to a con before. But one thing the Marine Corps teaches you, right? Adapt and overcome.
Adapt and overcome.
And you can do it, right? So I said, sure. So I went. And apparently I did a good enough job, and they wanted me to come back, and they wanted me to find more panelists. So I put out the blast and contacted you because of the LAAM Battalion, and you're like, same thing. Yeah, I've never done that before, but sure.
Well, it was a great experience, and I'd never met her before. And let me rephrase. We served in the same battalion, but each battalion is kind of like their own little family on the block.
Well, you have the battalion, right? So that's like living in town. Yep. And you have the batteries, which are like the neighborhoods. So if you weren't in the same battery, but even beyond that, you have, the officers and the senior enlisted and the junior enlisted, and you may mingle at a boss's night or the Marine Corps ball, but you're not necessarily seeing each other on a daily basis, right? You're just kind of aware of, oh yeah, I see that person at the PX periodically, and I know they're in my unit because I see their car down at the next battery unit. But you're not interacting on a daily basis.
Right.
But then you have those groups and the connections, and you're like, oh, hey, yeah, I recognize their name. So you get to get back together again. So.
Right. So we had never actually talked in LAAM. I knew who Lieutenant Drag was because
I think you saluted me a couple times.
A couple times, yes, because that's protocol. There was Lieutenant Co. and Bravo. And then, because again, LAAM wasn't really heavy on female Marines, WMs at all. There was 3 in our battery, 2 in our platoon. And so, yeah, we knew each other, but we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know about your battery, but we didn't want the officers coming around too much because that usually A, meant more work, or B, meant, the good idea fairies really struck you guys sometimes. And so we had to, I remember.
I still keep that fairy in my pocket.
Well, one of our lieutenants told us to get cargo straps out and strap the missiles to the launcher when we were going to go out to the desert. And we had a Master Sergeant Trujillo in our battery.
Oh, yeah. I remember him well.
Yeah, that was not a good... That lieutenant got squared away real quick.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Well, stop. Take them off. I'll handle it. I don't know what was said, but anyway. So we meet for the first time in Seattle. And I'm like, what am I going to talk to her about? Because, again, we hadn't ever really hung out. And we just kind of messaged back and forth on Facebook. And I'm like, I've never done this con stuff before. I had no idea. But it was like we had just picked up where time left off. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing, ma'am, I had another hawker who understood my job.
Yes.
That's rare.
It's rare and it's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Machine gunners, they all can talk. Oh, I fired the 240 Echo, the 240 Golf, and they're like sync like this, mortarmen the same way. Even other air wingers, we were kind of like the bastard children of the Marine Corps.
Yep.
The grunts doesn't think we were hard enough, and the air wing thought we were crazy. This humping stuff, we don't hump. Anyway, we meet in Seattle, and I'm like, I had no idea what was going to happen, and then the con got going. I'm like, there's this interesting cast of characters. But what surprised me the most was how many veterans, used their military time to work in different parts of science and technology and then wrote about it or, did their own artwork or whatever. And there were a bunch of them.
Oh, yeah.
On other panels. And it was really cool, getting to ask you questions on the panel that we were on. And it was a very diverse panel. We had, veterans from the Army and the Navy. We had another submariner there. And then, we had a Army guy who was like, he was an E9, and he was in the medical field. And then we had you, and it was very interesting, the different perspectives that they added to the con. And so I guess my first question is why did Norwest Con decide to really, let veterans in and let them focus on what they did?
I think a key part of it is recognizing that science fiction to be really engaging, right? Not total fantasy, but science fiction, going all the way back to Jules Verne, Isaac Asimov. They tie into the real life, right? Now, it could be like the real life 21st century, what we're doing right now, or it could be, what we did 50, 100 years ago, plus the recognition that cultures have different experiences. And if you take pieces from those experiences and work them into your story, it gives you a path for that story, right? So the military is one of those communities. And as you noticed with communications, with missiles, etc., a clear intersection with technology, right? And so science fiction has a big technology side to it. And so by having an actual military track, it allows them to pull in that community and kind of share what's going on in that community. And it could be that somebody is wanting to write a book and they want characters that are part of the military. Or maybe they're a little bit more like Robert Heinlein and want to do something on an alternate society and look at the possibility of how is like military culture going to influence how they see the possible different societies. And so it's good to have like actual people to talk to, knowing that, your specific experience may be different than somebody else's, but it allows you to learn, and then you can build on that with your imagination.
Well, it's just a really cool experience, and I really like the fact that, the military veteran part of NorwestCon wasn't just like an also-ran or an add-on.
It's intertwined.
It is
It's
intertwined
great.
and part of the experience. I remember I forget her name, of course I do, but the head of it who checked me in was like, hey, welcome, we're happy you're here. And it was just a really cool thing that, a lot of veterans get out and they're like, where do I fit in? I'm kind of, by myself or alone, but here's this whole culture and subculture working together, having a great time. That's the other thing. People were having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
People were happy to be there. It was really cool. So winding this down, is there anything on the horizon or on the radar scope for you, ma'am?
I think at the moment it's continuing.
Okay.
Right? Continuing to be involved with the VFW and the American Legion, continuing to do quilting. I'm going back to NorwestCon.
Nice.
So continuing with that. Hopefully going back to Okinawa next spring, and continuing karate and that.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. Yes.
We'll talk about that next time.
Yes. And we'll talk about, what was it? What did we call it when we played? It wasn't really football, but we had our flax on and we just slammed each other.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I can't believe you officers let us do that.
I can't believe they let us do it. We participated also. It's kind of like when you were did they let you do kickball when you were little?
Yes.
Okay. Well, before kickball, there was war ball, right? So what we did with our flak jackets was kind of like the Marine Corps version of war ball. And talk about a way to get your blood moving. Yeah, it was good. We'll have to talk about that more.
Awesome. It has been a great time coming to South Paris, Maine. And there is a Norway, Maine.
There is a Norway. There's also a China and a Mexico and a lot of other. Yeah, Maine is unique with the place names.
I'm just saying, I'm not kidding you. There is a Norway, Maine, not too far from here. But we are
about a mile and a half.
Okay. Well, we're in South Paris today at this VFW Post, and I think, we've got the quilts, which I'm like.
We might have to have a trip down to Boston to get you your own.
Well, I'll come back up again.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's the deal. And then, you have the Quilts of Valor, you have the VFW, you have the community connection. And I really like what you said there, ma'am. It's about these connections that make people come together and do amazing things. So it has just been a really big treat to come here and learn about Quilts of Valor, learn about what the VFW is doing, and the challenges and successes that veterans in this part of Maine have.
Been awesome talking to you.
Absolutely is. Always can't wait for next time. We'll talk about karate, some more sci-fi, and some more Hawk stories.
Cool.
Absolutely. Well, I am joined by Major Drag, and she's not a drag, ladies and gentlemen. We did serve together at the same time, the same battalion, different batteries, but it was all good. We're a very small group of Marines that did that, and we had a good time doing it. I'm in South Paris, Maine. I've had a great time, but as we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission flight. Thank you.
Remember, Honor teaches our mission. We care about it and we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 from Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinista One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.